I'm going to introduce now Sándor Vég. He is one of our anthropology majors in the Department of Anthropology. He is inclined towards the archaeological direction. We have pulled him over to the dark side, I'm afraid. He worked with me last summer in Jordan, however, and he will be working with me this summer in Petra. And he is also interested in the future in partaking in local excavations around Rochester, which is near and dear to his heart. So without further ado, the lost city of Tryon.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sándor Vég, and I'm going to be presenting on the lost city of Tryon. Before I really get into it, I want to give a little background as to why this interested me. I'm from the area, and I grew up not too far from where this was at, and I always heard about it and was always interested in this mysterious place. There's not a lot to be found out about this area. You've got to look at a lot of the history books. There's never been an excavation done there or anything like that. My hopes is that sometime in the future there will be an excavation done there. Originally, when I looked at this, I just thought of the lost city of Tryon, which was an American settlement. It was the first American settlement west of Canandaigua. It was a planned urban development, and it really fascinated me on that sense. As I started researching it more, I realized that there was a whole other layer of history that took place in this area with the Seneca, with French fur traders. And as I started looking at this, I realized that there's a lot of information that's not out there about the past that really needs to be explored further. The information that is out there just focuses on this one white settlement that took place in America. And there's a lot more to be learned about the area and how the history took place. But without further ado, so anyway, the lost city of Tryon, this is basically its setup. Today there are a couple houses that still exist. This is in Ellison Park where it's located. Ellison Park became Rochester's first park back in the 1920s, and because of that, the area was never really built upon, and so the evidence of what should be there should still be there in situ. It hasn't been, any construction or anything done in the area. As you can see, there's the Rondo Creek that goes through there. Fort Hill is right where the park would, where the city would actually be. It was the best place for boats coming off the Irondequoit Bay to be able to unload goods, and this is why it became such an important area for many different peoples, the French, the British, the Americans, the Seneca, and possibly even peoples before the Seneca. Like I said, there hasn't been excavation, so getting at some of this information has to go through historical documents and what we find out in other sites and stuff around the area. Anyway, let's get into the next thing. Okay, so to understand this area, we got to try to look at some of the geology and why it was chosen. Like I said, it was a route that people could unload stuff from, but the whole area itself had an earlier history. Back before the last glacial movement, the last little ice age we had when the Laurentide Glacier came down, we had a mega river that was flowing through New York State. It was a combination of the Genesee and the Irondequoit Creek. And basically it formed this really huge river, and the river carved out what is Ellison Park and a huge gash. And if you look at it's hard to see actually on this map because it's only a close-up, but this is a hill that comes up here and goes down probably 200 feet and then comes up on the other side about a mile apart. This is right where the opening of this mega river was. The Rondo Genesee is what they call it. But anyway, during the last glacial movement, what ends up happening is as the glacier starts to recede, it blocks part of the river. And where's that little laser pointer? Anyway, it blocks part of the river, and the river divides, and the Irondequoit Creek still exists in the same bed that it used to, and the Irondequoit Bay being the opening of that old river, now is a bay. And the Genesee River, the Genesee River ended up flowing on its new path now, and you can see it's a fairly new river. It's still got lots of waterfalls and stuff like that, and later on these waterfalls would become very important as far as the city of Rochester's growth and expansion. But at the time, it was not very useful for settlers because most of the time people back then were using the rivers for trade and for commerce, and they weren't using it so much for water power. And the Genesee having the falls made it really impractical to use to take boats from Lake Ontario up because you run into a waterfall. And so what would end up happening is they would come into the Irondequoit Bay, they come up the Irondequoit Creek, and then from there they would move stuff up the Genesee by land route and so on. So the bay and the Irondequoit Creek became a very important area for a lot of the peoples who were early settling in this area. When we look at some of the geology around there, there's like lots of silt deposits. There's large, dolomite, stones. There's stuff being pushed from like northern Canada and the Laurentide Mountains that's left behind here. But you can go into the park and you can see the huge silt deposits from like the alluvial plain kind of that was coming out at the end of it. So digging there shouldn't be too difficult in that respect. Okay, the first people I'm going to talk about, I'm not sure if they're the first settlers there, but the first people we have evidence settling in the area are the Seneca. The Seneca used to use the place as a portage route. A portage route basically is an overland route. Like I was saying, they would bring goods from like around the area. They would come up the Irondequoit Creek. They would unload stuff there or load stuff there, depending on which way they're heading, and then take it to some of the routes. Right where the city is located at, or the lost city of Tryon was located at, is also some major Seneca roads that went through the area, Iroquois Confederacy roads and stuff. And one of the major routes was right there, and it kept on heading west to the Genesee, and from there they could load onto boats or continue south, to wherever they were heading. Let's see, some of the Seneca settlements. Now this isn't what. Later on, the Iroquois would actually build a settlement right there at the Irondequoit Bay and in that area because they were starting to deal with like the French and a little bit with the English as far as fur trade was concerned and trying to trade for European items in exchange for like furs and stuff, which is what the French really wanted, and they were the major European force that would come in the area. There are some bigger Seneca settlements in the area, like Onondaga and stuff like that. Down by the Irondequoit Creek, they wouldn't have these palisades, but they might have like, this is a might. We don't know for sure. They might have like some longhouses there. There was probably, I would no doubt think that there would be like campsites and stuff that would still be left behind from the time period. You're getting off a nice little sea travel. You're probably going to want to hang out for a little bit. And when it became a trading area, they definitely had some permanent settlements there. They are written about. Places where there was probably about 50 to 100 people at the most that were hanging out in the area to do trading with, French and others that happen to be in the area. There's a marker down there right now. If you go down there, there's a large stone that marks, the portage route that the Seneca had and talks a little bit about it. You can see it over here in the right-hand corner, And if you go down to that area today, you can see it's where the dog park is. In Ellison Park, if any of you are familiar with that at all. And a lot of these markers and things are still available that you can see. Like I said, this hasn't been explored archaeologically, so we can only surmise that some of the stuff that might be found there. Prior to European contact, most of the stuff, we're going to find are like stone implements. We'll find some pottery and stuff like that. And here's an example of different like Seneca artifacts from other sites and stuff. That, with any luck, we might be able to locate if, we can do a dig in the area. The next people that would really have an impact, would be the French. The French were really interested in this area, and LaSalle and Champlain would explore the area in the 1600s. The Marquis de Nonville, would also be a driving force in the area. And with it, we would have a lot of French fur traders that were getting into there because that's what the French were interested in. Here's a picture of all three of these people. The French didn't get along so well with the Seneca. De Nonville in particular did some pretty horrific things, kidnapping people, bringing them to France, and also leading a forced march, onto Seneca villages, trying to destroy them and stuff. Unfortunately for him, he didn't do very well about it, and he actually got chased out of the territory. But it did leave an indelible mark on the Seneca, and French and Seneca relations were pretty strained after that. And when the French and Indian War finally comes around, the Seneca side with the English more so than the French. I'm guessing mainly just because of past French indiscretions. But there's a good 80-year period where French fur traders are in the area. French fur traders, for the most part, are coming from Montreal. And this particular part of history is what really interests me and excites me, and why I think it would be a really neat place to do a dig at. It has to do with the fur traders. There was an 80-year period where the French came in here and they were looking for furs, and they would spend like 6 months at a time trapping and stuff like that, trading. These were bachelors. They were in their 20s and 30s for the most part. They would, originally might be stationed in Montreal, and then they'd go back there and they'd sell their stuff and live for a while. But what ended up happening is a lot of these fur traders, and there's accounts written about it later on when American settlers come in the area and meet some of the Seneca for the first time, they find a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed ones. And what ends up happening is a lot of these fur traders decide to take up Seneca women as their wives, and some of them even move into the area using Montreal not as their home base, but as a place to just get rid of goods and then come back to here as their home base. And, with that note, can't we all get along? So, but this particular point in time really interests me because this is the first interaction between people from different continents, and it's really would be interesting to see exactly how much of an impact, the two had on each other. You probably can see more so maybe the Seneca impact on the French. It's better documented, but the impact the French had on the Seneca, I think, would be really neat to explore, to see what kind of goods they were trading, to see what kind of interactions were going on, and I think we could, get at some of that if we would, to explore the site further. Some of the stuff that the fur traders, these are some of the fur traders' tools. More than likely, some of these things would probably be found in the area. Some of these goods would probably also be traded for furs and stuff like that at the Seneca Indian Landing site. When the French did come into the area, that's when the Seneca set up a site there so that they could trade with the French. And so we get a little bit of an idea of some things that might be found. A lot of metal stuff, you know what I mean? That's probably going to keep over there. It's a creek. It floods a lot. Wood and stuff like that's probably going to rot. So what we are going to probably be able to obtain from the area would be, more durable goods like these. All right, next one. Okay, and the French end up establishing a fort. The fort doesn't exist anymore. This is an example of what a French fort might look like. If you were to go out to Seabreeze, there's a sign out there that talks about Fort de Sables. It lasted for about 7 years, I think it was. I think 1717 is what they say there. And the French used this. This was right by, the Irondequoit Bay, and they tried to control the bay with it. The English also were interested in this area and built a fort too. Today there's a replica of the English fort that was built there called Fort Schuler. The reproduction was built in 1932, just after it was named a park. You can go there and check it out. It lasted for about 1 year. It was kind of a trading post / fort. It didn't work very well. Like I said, it only lasted a year before they finally ended up leaving. But, they felt that it was important enough to make this reconstruction anyway, which is pretty cool, if you want to check it out. It does have electricity, Tried to keep with the times. Anyway, yeah, it's right by the dog park.